What's up, y'all? Welcome into another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. I hope everybody has had a very happy holiday season to this point. We've been a little bit erratic with the schedule, which I do apologize for. I know what it's like when your schedule gets thrown off for, your podcast, your shows, whatever you're into. And you go to, tune in at the regular time and it's not there. We are going to make it up to you this week, though. I got a bonus show tomorrow at 11. That's Tuesday the 30th. We'll also be going live Friday at 11 as usual. We've got a lot to dive into because we have not had a ton of shows over the last week and a half or so. I think I can count on one hand the amount of times I've actually taken a week off in my professional career over the last half decade. So again, I really appreciate you guys being flexible. It was kind of a quiet time. Was planning on talking about that Utah State game a little bit more than I ended up doing, but obviously losing by 42. Figured we can just kind of leave that one in the rear view. Feels like this program is good for kind of one road beat down each year. I'm not defending it. It was certainly ugly. Was hoping for a far better showing in a matchup between two of the top teams in the league. I'm also not panicking either. We've seen it before, whether it be in Viejas or Albuquerque or any of the tough road settings you have to deal with in the Mountain West. There's always going to be a couple of those where you kind of take your lumps, and then how you respond is key. And the Rams have an opportunity here this week against a couple of good teams, but I find these matchups to be fairly winnable for CSU. Nevada at home Tuesday night. And then the first ever trip to Grand Canyon, which will be interesting. I certainly had a fun holiday season. So again, I hope all of you guys did. If you're rocking live with us on YouTube this morning and wouldn't mind giving us a thumbs up, I certainly would appreciate it. Say what's up in the Toyota chat. Good to see my guy Steve with us this morning. Keep it civil as always, guys. But again, I love the engagement. It's good to be back. It's always good to get a couple of days off and get a chance to reset. Don't have a ton of those opportunities throughout the year, but also it feels so weird to get out of routine and to not be in the flow of things like we tend to be. So it is good to be back. Even if, after this, I'm going to have to call my mechanic and kind of negotiate. Hopefully I've got a lot of expensive work that needs to be done. I was sitting this morning thinking it's kind of funny. I think doctors and mechanics are the two instances where you don't want a long pause before they're about to tell you what's going down. That's never a good sign. Not my favorite scenario. We'll figure it out though. What is my favorite is Trey McBride. The dude is balling out in the NFL. He's absolutely killing it for the Cardinals. Those of us that followed him during his time at CSU, it's no surprise. I know so many of you are also Broncos fans and can't help but think, what if he had landed in Denver? What type of story that would be? The hometown kid playing for his hometown team. Would have been a lot of fun. I think if I could take any player in the NFL and put him on the Broncos selfishly as a Broncos fan, it would be Trey McBride. One, because the tight end position is fairly underwhelming for the Broncos right now, but two, because he is a bona fide superstar. He is the best player at his position in the league right now. I feel like the last year and a half or so, it was kind of trending that way, but there were a couple of other guys who I think you could make strong cases for. Kelsey has certainly come down a notch, but even some of the other guys like Hawkinson had been really good. Kittle is still really, really good, admittedly, but what Trey is doing right now is unprecedented. He set the NFL single season record this past weekend for receptions by a tight end, currently at 119 receptions for 1,174 yards and 11 touchdowns. I believe the record was 117, so he broke it and then some. Still has a week to play, which is pretty crazy to think about. But it's just been really cool to see what he's been able to do this year. Again, it felt like it had kind of been trending this way going back to especially the second half of last season. But even really the season before that, like you could see things starting to click for him. And I had talked about when he was drafted that as high as I was on him, you kind of knew there would be an adjustment period. You look at all the great tight ends in the NFL, pretty rarely does a guy just come into the league and burst onto the scene with like 1,000-yard, season. It's a position where you've got to get acclimated to the jump and physicality and size, and it's just a whole different world compared to what you're dealing with at the collegiate level. I mean, NFL linebackers and DBs compared to some of those guys he was getting matched up with in the Mountain West, it's just a completely different ball game. But we had no doubts that he was going to translate because you saw the way this dude dominated the field, and you just figured if the coach has half a brain, he's going to be able to scheme this guy open. And finally, for what feels like the first time in his career, he's kind of being optimized. And, as Bob's saying in the Toyota chat, imagine if he had a real quarterback. I agree. I will say the Jacoby Brissett connection seems to be working out pretty well for him. I don't know if Brissett being under center is the best thing for McBride's career long-term or like what's best for the Cardinals long-term. I don't anticipate he'll be there next year, but for the first time in his career, we're seeing him get targeted with consistency, especially in the red zone. He's got 11 touchdowns this year. He had 10 receiving touchdowns in 4 years at CSU, which is still the most absurd stat when I go back and look at it. A guy of his talent that they weren't able to get him in the end zone. I mean, Rocky Beers had 7 this year, and with all due respect to Rocky Beers, very good tight end. We'll actually talk about him and some other portal guys here in a couple of minutes. He's no Trey McBride. And when I look back and think back to that Mackey Award winning season, the fact that he was able to do it with only a couple of touchdowns is pretty insane. And it's even crazier that Steve Adazio tried to justify week after week that there was no way to better use him in the red zone. It just wasn't possible. We just didn't get it. But it's been really cool to see what he's gone on to do in Arizona. And I think at this point, he has put himself in the conversation for the best modern era next level Ram in the NFL. Now, I think at this point in time, the crown still belongs to Joey Porter. Joey Porter's ceiling in the NFL is far higher than I think a lot of people give him credit for. You look back at the stats, 60 sacks, that's a really solid career. It's not a Hall of Fame career, but it's an above average NFL career as a pass rusher. He was a 4-time All-Pro in total, which I did not remember. Only one first team, a couple of second team All-Pros. But still, that's putting yourself in the conversation, multiple times as the best player at your position in the NFL. He had 17 and a half sacks in 2008 with Miami. That was another run that every time I go back and look at it kind of surprises me a little bit. He had a great career, 8 seasons with 7 or more sacks. I think 6 of those with 9+. He had a really consistent and impressive pass rushing career with the Steelers and then the Dolphins, the Cardinals. But Trey is probably in the conversation for a top 10 player in the NFL. And no tight end and positional value is always going to make that kind of wonky. But when you're talking about a truly elite individual like Trey, when you have someone who's on par with, the status of like a Kelsey or a Gronkowski or a Shannon Sharp, and I think it's too early in Trey McBride's career to say he has that type of status. But I certainly think he has that type of ability. And I think we're seeing that with consistency now in the NFL. And it's just been pretty amazing to see. And again, like Bob said in the Toyota chat, just imagine if he was blessed to be in the position where he had a Tom Brady under center or, Mahomes or, all these guys. Look at Shannon Sharp had Elway and all of these great quarterback situations, Gates with, Rivers. I could only imagine, what Trey would be able to do in the NFL if he was in a more opportune scenario. I will say the Cardinals offense around him is so anemic right now that probably allows him to put up more receptions than he would. Maybe he would score more. Maybe he would have more receiving yards, but like more big plays, maybe some of the less of the stuff around the line of scrimmage. If they had a better run game, if they had more consistent playmakers out wide, I know there's hope for Marvin Harrison Jr., but to see what Trey has been able to do in a short span, it's been pretty dang impressive right now. And I'm really hoping that he's able to meet his full potential in the NFL. And a lot of that is going to be dependent on what's around him. I hope it doesn't end up being like a Larry Fitzgerald situation, another great all-time Cardinal where you see this guy year after year make Pro Bowls, be an all-pro, put up insane stats, but just largely be irrelevant in the big picture because he's playing for a losing franchise that's basically irrelevant and not ever going to factor into the conversation competitively. I personally hope to see him get out of Arizona. I know Trey is not the type of selfish individual, I don't think, to like demand a trade. And if he did, I think he would be well justified. But I just mean he's never been the diva type. He could have thrown a fit. He could have pounded a table. He could have thrown all the staff under the bus. As his last year at CSU, I think he was pretty fed up. I'll never forget how pissed off he looked, after that Wyoming loss in Laramie. And there've been a handful of those over the years that have, left a terrible taste in my mouth. But that one was certainly up there, just knowing it was going to be the last, opportunity he had in a rivalry game. Same thing with Toby. And that was kind of his breaking point, I think. And to his credit, never, threw him under the bus, never in the pros has, made any comments that have disparaged Kyler Murray, despite the fact that very clearly, Murray kind of held back some of Trey's production. I mean, you see the difference in production with Brissett there versus Murray. It's night and day. But he's always been, a consummate pro, and it's just been really rewarding to see a guy who did everything the right way, stayed loyal to CSU, never been a diva, never complains about the fact that he's never truly been optimized. I mean, his physical tools are through the roof, and he's never really been, until now, put in a position where teams have kind of fully taken advantage of that. But I think the sky is the limit for him over the next decade, and I'm really interested to see what he can be, because I think he's going to be a first-team All-Pro this year. It would surprise me if that is the only time he ends up, being an All-Pro, because I think his window, so long as he stays healthy, knock on wood, that's always going to be a factor in all of this. But as long as he's out there and doing his thing, I think he has a chance to be pretty dominant here, for the better part of a decade, likely. And I think there's a world in which you look up and 6 to 7 years and, he's a 4 or 5 time Pro Bowler, and he's very firmly established himself as, the premier tight end in the NFL. And we're all just kind of shaking our heads thinking back, like, I can't believe this guy played for the Steve Adazio era CSU Rams. And it's cool. It's really cool. He was somebody who always treated me great. Obviously, we had a pretty unique relationship, given that we had an NIL deal with Trey at the time, and it allowed me to, get him on the show and get to know him a little bit behind the scenes, which I maybe would not have been able to do if I had just covered him like everybody else on the roster. It was fortunate timing in that regard, but I just can't help but feel immense pride when I watch that guy suit up. And it was a really crappy season for CSU football as a whole, but when you see what guys like him are doing, it's a good reminder of the amount of talent that has come through this program over the years. And it's why when people start being defeatist and, what's the point, it kind of drives me crazy, because you look across the board, in the NFL, the amount of talent you can land. I know it's harder to retain those guys than it's ever been. Would Trey have been at CSU for 3 years had he, say, started his career in 2023, 2024? That's tough to say, because there would have been a lot of money thrown at him. He had a lot of money thrown at him anyway, especially late. I know he considered, going with Bobo to South Carolina. Ultimately did not, fortunately. But he's just one of the good guys, and it's cool to see one of the good guys have this type of success. So I think I've covered it at this point. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's been cool to see, because he was one of the guys coming out that there was no doubts that what he is able to do out on that field was going to translate. And I've had misses over the years. Don't get me wrong. This isn't, a let's pat myself on the back moment, because I think anybody that watched him had a pretty firm understanding of how good he was. But, I thought Grayson could be a legitimate NFL quarterback. Didn't work out. Maybe if things had been different, maybe in a different system, who knows? But I feel like Shaq Barrett and Trey are kind of the two guys that I had no doubts about. One, I felt like they were being undervalued physically, Shaq especially, but it was a mentality and an attitude thing. They're just relentless motors. And I just knew they were going to do all the right things off the field. You knew they were going to work their ass off, and the talent was there. So if a couple of breaks went their way, they were going to have really good careers. And it's just been pretty cool to see how that's all played out. Let me take a quick breather real quick again. Shout out to everybody in the Toyota chat. Great to be back with you guys post-holidays. We are going to shout out a couple of partners, and then we are going to get into the staff and portal. And we'll get into some of the best and worst moments of 2025 for CSU Ram fans. I want to shout out our presenting sponsors over at Branded Bills. Whether you need snapbacks, truckers, fitteds, beanies, tees, you name it, they've got it. Branded Bills has you covered with performance and style. If you are looking for gear to make your brand stand apart, look no further than Branded Bills. They've got you covered with the best custom headwear. We know that firsthand at DNVR. I've got 3 or 4 different, or 4, I guess now, different CSU hats from the on-campus collection. You love that. They have an official partnership with CSU. I've also got DNVR and ALLCITY network hats through Branded Bills. They're comfortable. They're versatile. I like that they're kind of that moisture wicking material, so you can wear them to the gym if you want or on the golf course. But also, you know, if you're going out to dinner and you got a polo on, something like that, they're going to look sharp. It's always a difficult balance as a hat guy, right? Like certain hats are perfect for certain situations. Not all of them are versatile. These bad boys are. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. I also want to talk to you guys about Game Time. Game Time is the best app around for getting the best deals in town. If you're looking to get Broncos tickets this weekend, if you are looking to get Nuggets tickets, Avs tickets, there's a couple of home games this week. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'll be on pre and post game. Make sure you're watching tonight and Wednesday. But there's no better place than Game Time to get deals for all your favorite teams. It's incredibly easy to use. The Game Time guarantee means you can trust you'll get 100% authentic tickets. I love that the price you see is the price that you pay. You don't get hit with 8 million secret fees at the end. That's genuinely one of my biggest pet peeves as somebody who loves to attend sporting events. And I'm also, you know, kind of a theater nerd and live music. I love all of that stuff. And I hate when you think you're going to get a good deal. Oh, look, these seats, $28. And then you go to pay. Ends up being like $72 in convenience fees and service charges. Now with Game Time, nice and smooth. Take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that code DNVR for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account, use that code DNVR for $20 off. Tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. Joey in the Toyota chat says, if McBride played in a large market, he'd get the deserved recognition. Shame that he is hidden/overlooked because of the organization he plays for. I will say, with fantasy football and betting being what it is, I do think he probably gets more recognition and credit on a national level than he would, say, in the 90s or early 2000s, especially just because, like, back then we were so dependent on, you know, watching whatever was on basic cable. You didn't have Red Zone and you know, all the things we have now that give guys like McBride an opportunity to be displayed on a national stage. I just hope that he's not viewed as like one of those Larry Fitzgerald types, right? Who I think everybody knew was one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. But whenever you talk about Larry Fitzgerald, you have to add the caveat of it's a shame he never got to play in the big one. You know, I know they technically had the one run with Kurt Warner and they went to the Super Bowl and that was a whole lot of fun. But I do think that it would be cool to see him in a better opportunity. Joey says, we need to work on Jam's lack of CSU hats, hoodies he doesn't wear for this particular CSU podcast. Dude, I've got so many. I like to mix it up a little bit, keep things fresh. I've done, you know, thousands of CSU podcasts over the years. I've got some other gear I want to show off every now and then, but especially as we get in season and stuff like that, you know, I'll rock them more. I got some pretty cool new CSU shirts. Actually, let me show you one. Shout out to my guy, Evan Tynan. I posted about it on Twitter, but look at these bad boys. New CSU gear. You can rock that. Get the green and gold store, I think. Really, really cool. I posted the link on Twitter. I'll post that again. But shout out to my guy. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to rocking those. Let's get back on track here. If you missed it, kind of an interesting weekend for our friends, if you want to call them that, over in Boulder. Tough day for Tad Boyle, lost his second Super Bowl of the year. The UNC Bears, who genuinely might have the case for the best basketball team in Colorado this year, pulled off their first win over the Buffs in like 90-something years. I always think stuff like that is cool to see. But this really isn't a troll CSU segment. I actually am interested to see what happens with their new AD hire, Fernando Lovo, who I think is a really solid hire coming over from New Mexico. Another tough blow for our friends in Albuquerque. Feels like whenever they have anything go their way, the universe just ensures that it comes full circle and they end up getting gut punched. I know that X staying in town is largely kind of dependent on that relationship. I don't think he's going to bounce now all of a sudden before next year. The coaching carousel more or less seems to be coming to an end. But I do think he is a really good hire. And I'm really interested, especially to see if he prioritizes regional rivalries. My buddy Aaron Harris, I saw tweeted about this, and that was something I noticed about his time at New Mexico. It felt like he really worked hard to emphasize the Rio Grande rivalry, which had kind of been de-emphasized a little bit, in recent years by previous administrators. And he just kind of understood that an in-state rivalry was certainly good for UNM, but it's good for growth and interest in college sports in the state as a whole. Right now we have this weird gap where CSU and CU aren't going to play for a couple of years. We'll see what happens with all that. There's a lot of moving parts when it comes to that type of stuff, but it would be nice to have an administrator over there who truly understood how important that is. And I think CSU at the moment does. But I hope to see that kind of be a factor moving forward. We'll see. Aaron says, J Mike, how do you feel about Matt Stevens' take on those shirts? I missed that one, so I guess I'll have to go back and see what he said. Just kind of briefly, I wanted to give an update on the portal and what's happening with the staff. We've kind of talked about this before the holiday break, but the offensive coordinator is going to be Bryce Tracy. He was the quarterback coach for UConn under Mora. I've heard a lot of good things about him. I am hoping to get my friend Mike Sanford, current head coach of the Valor Christian football program, on the show this week to talk about him, as well as Matt Mitchell, who is his brother-in-law and will be the quarterback coach / passing game coordinator. Neither of those are officially announced from CSU. Although I don't know, Bryce Tracy was listed on the website. Then when I looked this morning, he wasn't, and there was some other people listed. Who knows what's happening there? As far as I know, the offensive staff is still as expected. Mora head coach, Bryce Tracy OC, QB coach Matt Mitchell, wide receiver coach Kashif Moore, who will be coming over from UConn as well. We do not know who the O-line coach will be right now. Defensive coordinator, obviously Tyson Summers is being retained, as is Matty Ayu. Braden Hendrick will continue to coach the safeties. I have heard Roosevelt Maggot Jr. will be the outside linebackers coach. Trent Matthews will be staying on staff, I believe, as run game specialist. Also sounds like Alex Collins, the GM, is expected to stick around. Again, we'll see what happens as far as CSU when they announce all of this officially. But we are starting to get an idea of what this is going to look like. And I think what's kind of exciting, especially on the offensive side, is it's going to be a whole new look. There's been some tough departures as far as the portal goes. I don't think that's shocking. And frankly, I've been a little surprised that the masses seem to be, I don't know. The portal era sucks. So I want to be fair with how I'm saying this, because I don't want to make it seem like this is good for college football or make it seem like I'm not equally annoyed with the status quo. But I do think we know what the game is, right? And roster turnover was going to be inevitable with the staff change. So I've just been a little surprised to see so many people surprised over some of these departures. Yes, in an ideal world, you would have been able to hang on to more of the key contributors from this year, and that would have been beneficial from a continuity standpoint of being able to kind of transition into a new era. But honestly, college football is just so different today. It's not 2012 where Jim McElwain rolls in and takes advantage of a lot of quality football players that were recruited by Steve Fairchild. It's not even 2022 anymore, where Norvell inherited quite a few Adazio guys, certainly, but even Bobo era players. And that was kind of the beginning of what the game has become today. A lot of those guys ended up leaving in early September, and that was a mess in its own right. And it actually, in hindsight, would have been better had they have just left in December in the first place and you hadn't committed over a half of year of practice time and investment into all of those players. But like it just is what it is, right? In the modern era. And yes, I would have loved to have seen Lloyd Avant stick around because I think he could be 1,000-yard running back who also gives you some versatility in the return game and prove to be a pretty solid pass catcher. I imagine a P4 team is going to be pretty interested in him. You know, Javian Kennard's a home run hitter. We found out recently that Rocky Beers and Jackson Warren are both leaving. And honestly, I didn't even realize Rocky Beers had another year of eligibility. I guess he got an injury hardship waiver. I will say the whole Colorado kids will be more loyal argument should never be used again. It's dead. Yes, you still need to recruit Colorado, but second year in a row, Colorado kid comes home having had done nothing at previous stops, completely thrives and flourishes, only to hit the portal again. That's not personal. I don't have anything against Rocky Beers. He has every right to, you know, explore the portal and explore his options. I'm sure he'll get a nice little payday here. All the power to him. He's taking advantage of the options he has on the table. I get all that. But this is what college football is. And especially when you have a staff change, like the likelihood of being able to hang on to these key contributors, it's just not, the odds aren't very good these days. And you know, we'll see what happens with Owen Long and some of these other guys. But I'm not shocked that Armani Winfield and Lloyd Avant and Javion Kennard and the tight ends and all these guys are hitting the portal. By my count on my tracker, up to 23 departures. It's probably more like 25, 26 at this point. It's hard to keep track with all of these guys. And I guess it is still technically possible that some of these players could end up back at CSU, but that doesn't happen very frequently. But this just kind of is what college football is. You know, there's going to be 50 plus new players on the team, probably 5 to 10% at least, I would say, if not more of that will come from UConn. And then a whole lot more will come from all over the place. You know, JUCO, D2, D1 drop down, all of the avenues are going to be in play for CSU. But we knew this was going to be a total rebuild, and that was inevitable when you fired your head coach, right? And when you look at what the offense did this past year, yes, it sucks to lose some guys who under, you know, more opportune circumstances could probably be impactful players on a more competitive team. What are you going to do? You're going to spend $500,000 to keep a running back? You know, are you going to throw $400,000 at a tight end? I mean, it's a dilemma, especially when you likely are going to need to land a portal quarterback and are going to have to completely retool your offensive line. You know, to me, success in the foundation of your roster, it's under center and in the trenches. And so those are going to be your biggest areas of priority. Certainly you're going to have to fill a lot of holes at the skill positions because you're going to not have a ton of returning production out wide. It's going to be a whole new stable of running backs, and we'll see. It's tough to do that all in one cycle. The likelihood of being 9-3, 10-2 in year one, probably not great, but it's also not impossible either. You see what New Mexico was able to do this past year. Fresno State, UNLV. I mean, there are a lot of teams in this modern era that have been able to play this right, and they've been able to completely revamp their program in a really short time. Now, I don't think you can. I think you hope for it. I don't think you expect it. I think you strive for it, and that's certainly going to be the goal. But the trenches and under center are where you're going to have to spend your money. And the reality of that is there are some guys who are going to leave for greener cash. Whether the past years prove to be greener in the end, that's TBD. How many guys have we seen leave under the guise of getting a payday or under the guise of they're going to blow up at the P4 and they go on to do jack shit? They do absolutely nothing. A lot of guys don't even get picked up, period. There are a decent amount of players, I think, that have entered the portal that the odds of them getting signed by another D1 school don't seem all that high to me. Now, those aren't the Rocky Beers and Lloyd Avants of the world. Those guys are going to be just fine. But this is what college football is today. I hate a lot of it. I'm also not going to cry over spilled milk or be shocked that a bunch of guys are leaving when you add a coaching change, because this is just the reality of the game. We'll see what they're able to do. I like a coach like Jim Mora, who has NFL experience, who also has been in this situation before at UConn and has been active, in the portal. Like, I like his ability to be able to build a roster on the fly, probably better than the previous coach, who I also, I think have been very open. I have a lot of respect for Jay Norvell. This isn't me trying to bash on him. I think he brought a ton of talent into the program over the years for a variety of reasons. They had trouble hanging on to a lot of that talent, or certain talent had trouble putting everything together or staying on the field because of injury stuff. Like, there's so many different factors that play into all of that. I think he probably should have hired an offensive play caller earlier than he did. By that point, it was too late. But I think that Jim Mora knows what he has signed up for. And I'm interested to see what type of roster he can put together here in year one. But again, at least 23 players from CSU now in the portal. Most recently, Rocky Beers, Jackson Warren, Armani Winfield, Lloyd Avant, and linebacker Jeremy Naborn, who had 35 tackles and a couple of sacks this past season. It's not all doom and gloom, though. CSU Pueblo offensive tackle, 3-star transfer Tyler Etheridge, set to visit CSU on January 4th per 247. He'll be visiting Oklahoma State on January 2nd. 3-year starter, 2-time all RMAC selection, 6'5", 300 pounds, nice frame. He's somebody I think that could come in and be a nice stopgap tackle for you, in year one. Although we'll see what ultimately happens with some of those UConn transfers. We're going to move on. We're going to talk about the highs and lows of 2025 as a CSU fan. I'll get to some of your questions and comments here in the Toyota chat. If I can't get to them right away, Alyssa, our incredible producer, can star them, and we'll come back around at the end of the show. Let me take a quick breather real quick and shout out a couple of our awesome partners. Hey, Colorado. Stop by your local Dick's Sporting Goods for the hottest apparel and footwear around. They've got all the top brands. They've got Nike, Adidas Original, FP Movement, VRST, Kalia, Hoka, DNVR, and more. Still kind of crazy to throw DNVR in that little list, but you go to a Dick's Sporting Goods in the metro area, that's exactly what you're going to see. They've got DNVR gear, which is surreal. It wasn't that long ago, when we were a company of like 10 to 15 people slinging T-shirts, on corners and stuff. Now we're in Dick's Sporting Goods. I've always been a big Dick's Sporting Goods fan. I got a bunch of Christmas presents for my brother there this holiday season. I got him a Vikings sweatshirt. His fiance is a Vikings fan. Also got him a new Broncos hat with the throwback logo. It was sick. It was one of those I was like, maybe I'll hang on to it and get him something else. Ended up doing the right thing. Get your gear fast with free curbside pickup at your nearest store or easy shipping from Dicks.com, because every season starts at Dick's. I also want to talk to you about Coors Light. They have been awesome partners of ours over the years. They encourage you to choose chill. I think a lot of you get it. This time of year can be overwhelming. The holidays as a kid, it's just fun and magic. And the older you get, the more of a chaotic process it becomes. You're trying to satisfy 8 million relatives on multiple sides of the family. And then, once you get in a serious relationship, you only throw more family into the mix. And it's all the driving and presents and traffic and just headaches. It's easy to not be the chillest guy around. I don't ever want to be that guy. I want to make sure I do the little things, go for a walk, take a deep breath. I'm always going to choose chill when I'm in the right state of mind. Then I'm going to kick back. I'm going to put a game on. I'm going to have my friends over, and I'm going to crack open an ice cold Coors Light. It's mountain cold refreshment, cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for a smooth finish. Make the most out of the times you choose to chill. Choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door. Visit CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. Beer. Okay, here. Bob says, is CSU football expecting over 50 to 60% of the players going to the portal? And if so, as the writing on the wall, when you're 2-10, you should probably hit the portal. Any potential players? I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, as much as it stinks to lose some of these guys, and I don't want to just say you're 2-10, so it doesn't matter if you bring any of these guys back. It's challenging to completely flip a roster overnight and hit on 40 plus transfers. Most scenarios like that don't prove to be New Mexico this past season based on what we've seen in recent years. But I do think it was kind of inevitable with the situation, and it's hard to put an exact number on it, but I would say that more than half of the roster will be new, which means more than half your roster is leaving, and the vast majority of those guys are going to be portal departures. It's hard to give a grade or truly assess the state of the team until you start seeing who is also coming over. I joked about this on Twitter last week, but just the nature of the calendar, right? As you find out who's leaving first and the sky is falling, this sucks, we're so cooked. And then it flips and you start getting 10, 15 transfer additions and you talk yourself into, it didn't work out for him at this school, but it's going to be different here. We can fix him. And, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But that's just kind of how it goes, right? Like you lose a bunch of guys, it feels like the sky is falling, everything is over. You add a bunch of guys, boom, we're so back, baby, everything's perfect. That's the product of the calendar. I do like, though, that it'll be a little bit more set in stone in terms of what the roster is going to look like, because you only have the one portal window, right? Like, I think right now feels especially tough for CSU fans because unlike the last couple of years, you're only going to have the one portal window. So guys aren't going to do the, maybe I'll go into, winter and see how things are going. And then maybe I'll portal, or maybe I'll even stay through spring and portal. Like it's now or never. And because of that, a lot of these guys are going to say, all right, well, I guess I'll do it now. So it just feels like there's far more, but the numbers are going to be pretty are going to be pretty similar, I think, to what you would have anticipated giving a coaching change just in the past. That probably would have been over 2-3 cycles over about a year and a half. And now it's all going to be in this one big cycle. But I think that's better in terms of roster building, right? Because then you don't end up in a 2022 scenario where you think we've got all of this continuity, we've got all these guys back, they're here spring ball, we're wasting reps on them. And then by the conference slate of the actual season, they're hitting the portal. They can't do that anymore. I think long term, that's good for the program. I just think in the moment, it can be pretty overwhelming for the fans because now all of a sudden in like a 10-day span, 30 dudes just hit the portal. What the hell is going on? Like I've never seen anything like this. And you just got to remember how much the recruiting calendar has been shifted and tweaked in the last couple of years. I'm hoping that we're getting closer to a structure that brings a little bit more stability and makes a little bit more sense logically. I think we're closer. I still don't think it's perfect. I still think unlimited transfers is not the answer. But I also think that now that the Pandora's box has been opened, it's pretty tough to expect anything to close back the other way substantially without, I don't know, without the NCAA somehow seizing power again. And it seems like at the moment they have none whatsoever. Kevin says, I still really want the Harvard quarterback. Yeah, I think there's a couple interesting options in the portal that you can look at. Harvard, Old Dominion. There's obviously going to be a bunch of no-name guys who weren't playing but are just looking for an opportunity to. But as far as the established guys go, I think both of those are interesting. I do think there will be a UConn QB or two that end up coming over. We'll see. I still think there's a small possibility a freshman starts next year, depending on what happens in the portal. I'm pretty high on Emmanuel, guys. I'm pretty high on him. Alrighty here. Aaron says this is probably a question that could load to an entire episode, but how would J Mikes fix the college football calendar to improve the product? That's a really interesting question. I think one portal period was pretty important. I think the thing that they've got to figure out, and maybe we will go longer on this at some point this week, is how do you make the postseason matter more for the majority of schools? Because I think the college football playoff being the only thing that matters is really bad for the NFL. And I think it was Chris Vanini or one of those athletic guys. He said something along the lines of the NFLization, of college football in the sense that the playoffs are the only thing that matter. That results in so many meaningless games. Like how many teams right now do we have tanking where the only thing that matters is the 1 seed? That's not fun as a whole. College football was fun because games are about pride. They're about more than just the playoff. And obviously, you have goals. You want to win championships. You want to do all of that. but I think being in this spot where the playoff is all we fixate on all year round, it's the only thing that people talk about, bowl games being ignored. Like, I don't think that's a very fun scenario for the vast majority of college football fans. So to me, fixing the postseason format inherently solves a lot of what is currently wrong with college football, but there's so many things. Quite honestly, if I could take college football and just put it back in 2005, I probably would. Like, I am excited for the future of the Pac-12, but if you just told me I get 2005 conferences, CU and Nebraska in the Big 12, OG Pac-12, teams like Utah, BYU still in the Mountain West, that's a fun league. It really was. Everything else, I would take that. I'd take the BCS at this point. Like, I know it was imperfect, but I think it was more fun to have 30 big-time bowl games than what we're at right now, where, yes, more teams have an opportunity to win a national championship, but the dialogue around it has become such a headache. And frankly, I'm tired of hearing like the fans of the 9-3 and 8-4 teams of the world make it seem like they were screwed or like we deserve to win. No, you don't. And we would have laughed in your face in 2005 if you tried to make that case. How you fix the bowl season, I don't know. I know some people are saying put them at the beginning of the year. I think Rick Neuheisel is kind of the guy who really started that. We played that clip from him on the show about a week and a half ago. I could see it being interesting. I think we would have to really flip how we view bowls and what they mean, because at that point it's an MTE, right? It's not an accomplishment necessarily, and that's where I think it gets wonky. Are the bowl matchups determined by what the team did the year before? Is it like a reward scenario? Is it completely random? Is it just based on, like, I don't know. How do you work that in? Like, is CSU CU, is that like the Rocky Mountain Bowl or something? Or is it a situation like if you win that we want the Mountain West and Pac-12 winners to play in Vegas? Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, how do you determine who plays in those matchups? I think is what makes it interesting, because if it's just random matchups, that's just a non-conference game. That's not a bowl. You didn't earn it. But I don't know. You got to get creative. I know it's an imperfect scenario. All right, we ended up going way longer on some of that stuff than I anticipated. I probably could have just kept going on that and saved some of this for tomorrow, but this is what I prep for. So let's get into it. I'm going to dive into some of the highs and lows of being a CSU fan. We are going to do 10 positives, 5 negatives, right? Like, we're going to start with the medicine. We're going to start with the bad. Then, spoonful of sugar makes medicine go down, and we'll get the positives. We'll leave on a high note. But I thought it'd be kind of fun to look back on the best and worst of 2025. I know last Friday, not everybody tuned into it, but we did do a best of the DNVR Rams podcast, where I just kind of played some of my favorite segments, some of my favorite interviews, Ali Farouk-Manesh, John Weber, my rambles on Nick Clifford, after he dropped 36 in Boise, and like why his story was so cool. If you didn't check it out, please go back and do it at some point. But I thought we would look at it not from the podcast standpoint, but just like the CSU Ram fan experience, right? And being a CSU fan, it's a lifelong commitment, for better or for worse. This year we got to experience basically everything that life's emotional roller coaster has to offer. It genuinely was a year where I think I experienced as much joy and excitement and pride, like especially on the basketball side of things, as I've ever felt as a CSU supporter. Also probably equally as frustrating and disappointed and despondent as I've ever been in terms of like where the football program was at, say, late September. We experienced it all. We laughed, we cried, we hugged, we fought. It was a little bit of everything. But I want to get into all of that. Before we do, let's take one last break. Let's shout out a couple of our partners. Keep those questions and comments rolling. I'm having a lot of fun interacting with all you in the Toyota chat. But let me shout out those partners before we get into the best and the worst of 2025 for CSU Rams. This holiday season, make any get-together better with Raising Cane's. Raising Cane's, they are raising the level when it comes to what is possible for your tailgate experience. You can swing by any Raising Cane's. You can grab yourself some chicken fingers, of course, some amazing Cane's signature sauce. They've got great sides, either, the fries and the Texas toast, and you can never go wrong with a little bit of coleslaw, although not the biggest slaw, man. I'll usually substitute a little bit of extra toast, but right now, go pick up a big old container of chicken fingers, maybe a jug of some freshly brewed tea, squeeze lemonade, make yourself a little Arnie Palmy alert. There's no need to stress this season. You can order your favorite chicken fingers on the go at raisincanes.com. I love Raising Cane's. You love Raising Cane's. Make your tailgate experience next level. Raising Cane's chicken fingers. One love. I also want to talk to you about Toyota. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA for generations. Toyota's built durable legends that are destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. So whether you're conquering off-road trails or hauling the weight of the world, there is a Toyota truck that's just right for you. Check out the Tacoma. Check out the Land Cruiser. They've got 17 models available, all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, like the Epic 4Runner. They make more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. And of course, Toyota has 16 different hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail. That's what makes them perfect for Colorado living. You can take them out to the Western Slope. You can survive the winds of the Eastern Plains. You can drive around Cap Hill, but also have the ability to handle the weather that gets thrown your way. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics. They are the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. Okay. Like I said, we're going to start with the worst, and then we're going to have more fun, and we're going to focus a little bit more on the positive side of things. But the bottom 5 moments for the CSU Rams in 2025, starting at 5, working our way down to 1. I'd love to hear what you think I got right, what you think I got wrong, what you think should be on the list. Throw some suggestions out. But at number 5, I've got the curry spitting incident in Boise. That's right before we found out that Jim Mora was being hired. So it kind of felt like the culmination of everything that went wrong this past season. Everything CSU fans had suffered through, from the letdown of this team coming in with championship expectations and then ultimately having the worst, season the program has had in decades, and it leading to the coaching firing and the offensive disasters and multiple offensive play caller changes and multiple QBs. All of that kind of culminates with the Rams getting their ass beat on national TV by a Boise State team who frankly was not that good. I know they still won the league again. I've said this probably 4 out of the last 5 years, but it's been frustrating that Boise is not what they used to be. The gap between them and everybody else has certainly, it's shrunk, and yet they continue to dominate the league, and CSU continues to not even come close to factoring in the championship conversation. But all of that just felt like that, with the emotional low of a player, and I gave my thoughts on it when it happened. I'm not trying to rip on him. Like, young guy did something stupid, but it's inexcusable. And it was just such a low moment and such a bad look for CSU that I think it absolutely had to be on this list. By that point, the season was over, but it was still just a new low. Number 4, I've got the fluky game against Northern Colorado. A win in the standings on the record books, a loss optically. CSU got completely outplayed by Northern Colorado the entire game. Credit Ed Lamb. I said it that game. I'll say it again. They deserved to win that game. They were the better team for 4 quarters, aside from the controversy of the catch, which, do I think he caught it? No. But do I think there was enough video evidence to overturn that play based on what had been called? Absolutely not. Had it gone the other way, I would have been livid. I understand why UNC fans feel like they got robbed that day, because it was hard to explain how they were able to overturn it. Now, I think logically, based on the angles and stuff like that, do I think he caught it? No, I think he trapped the ball against the ground, but they called it a touchdown. And the fact that the Rams escaped, it almost was worse in some ways because it was like, yes, it's a win, but now we have to sit here and I have to explain all of this, for the rest of my life. And it was just a bad day to be a CSU football fan, despite it being a win. I don't know if there's ever been a win on the books that felt more like a loss than that game against Northern Colorado on September 6th. Number 3 in our list of worst moments. This isn't fun. CSU football gets shut out in the border war, October 25th. How many times have we driven up to Laramie only to, come back feeling like, Dennis Reynolds and It's Always Sunny, just full rage mode, hands on the steering wheel. Yeah, there's not a whole lot more to say other than it doesn't get much worse than getting blanked by a really crappy sub 500 iteration of your biggest rival, and to just get completely punked the way that CSU did. Fitting showing for a just horrible season. Number 2, I've got Nico Medved leaving for Minnesota March 23rd. Look, the writing was on the wall at that point. I've argued that he went out about as well as you can, all things considered. It's not a McElwain situation where you felt like he had one foot out the door and the team suffered competitively as a result. He went out by winning the first conference championship in over 2 decades and being a couple seconds away from the program's first ever Sweet 16. Like, there's no doubt that team played their ass off for Medved, that he was locked in on that run. But it hurt. It hurt to lose him after all those years. I think people get it. It's home. It's his alma mater. How often do we talk about CSU guys? Now we'd love to come home. We'd love for them to come home. You can't make that argument and then, judge Medved for doing the exact same thing. But it'll always hurt to lose a quality coach. And, it had been a really special run. I was tight with him, individually. So that always stinks when you lose a guy who you consider a friend. Still consider him a friend. I'm always rooting for Nico. But, now I don't see him every week like I did for years and years. And that obviously brings us to number 1, which is Derek Queen gets away with the travel. March 23rd. That loss hurt as much as any I've experienced in over 2 decades of being a CSU supporter. The showdown in Boulder a couple years ago was tough. The showdown in 2004, the Marcus Houston game, that one will be forever burned in my mind, as will the 2002 loss to UNLV, which I've ranted about all these losses a million times. We won't go down that rabbit hole again. The Rams deserved to win that game. They were the better team. They didn't shoot the 3-ball well, which was ironic after shooting really well in the hot stretch. Maryland made a couple of more threes than CSU did, and Derek Queen got away with a very obvious travel. I don't care about you can't call that in that moment arguments. He traveled. It was a violation, and it's the reason that CSU didn't get to go on to a Sweet 16. And I will always be sour grapes about that. I don't care. Yeah, maybe I'm being a sort of, I don't care. It was a travel. Should have called it. It sucks that the most magical run we've had with this program came to an end like in a way that was completely out of their control. Had Jalen Lake missed the shot, it is what it is. You battled. We did everything right. They even defended the possession pretty well. They just didn't get the whistle when they needed it most, and that's always going to be tough because it's the woulda, coulda, shoulda, right? Do I think CSU would have beat Florida? Probably not. But I certainly would have loved the opportunity to, and you never know in the tournament. And frankly, CSU was playing as well as anybody in the country at that point. They proved that with what they did in a dominant win over Memphis, and then in going toe-to-toe with a very talented Maryland team. And obviously what Derek Queen's doing in the NBA, I mean, that dude's a baller. It's funny, like I find myself rooting against him, and it's not his fault. He didn't swallow the whistle there. He didn't he didn't ignore the call, but I can't help it. It's petty, it's immature, but I am going to root against that dude his entire career. All right, let's get into the positives. Let's have more fun. The top 10 moments for CSU Ram fans in 2025, and we'll kind of have to blow through some of these, or we'll see. If I end up going slow, maybe I'll pull a cliffhanger and hang on to 5 for tomorrow or something like that, but I don't like doing that. All right, number 10, The fluky win over Fresno State. I think this was the only fun moment of the entire football season. I guess you could technically say post Washington, there was still a little bit of, man, if we could do that against that team, imagine what we're going to do against the rest of the schedule. But by the time September was finished, that had gone completely out the window. How CSU managed to beat that Fresno team the way they did, and I think Fresno is a good, not great team, but I mean, certainly had a nice season, ended up winning their bowl game, another thing CSU couldn't do. One of the more surprising results of the entire Mountain West slate ended up being the final hurrah under Jay Norvell, the only fun moment of the year, which is crazy and sad all at the same time. Number 9, I've got the CSU Hoops win February 15th, the day after Valentine's Day. The Rams beat down the Wyoming Cowboys in Moby by 35, tie the program record for conference win, I think, over an opponent, something like that, or largest margin of victory over Wyoming. I don't remember exactly what the feat was, something along those lines. It secured a season sweep, which is probably going to be pretty tough to pull off this year. The Cowboys are for real. Anytime you beat down your rival like that, I know they weren't great last year, but to beat a rival, and that was kind of a key part of what started that run, was really, I guess, the win that I'm about to talk about. The Orange Out win over San Diego State, February 8th, I feel like is when the Rams kind of started to become who they were ultimately going to finish the season as. Both those wins, I have it as 9 and 8 respectively in the list, were some of my favorite moments of 2025. Orange Out wins over San Diego State always just hit a little bit different. They are the standard. That is a tip of the cap to what that program is, and an acknowledgement of what it means to beat them. And kind of same thing with Wyoming. The program isn't super great, in basketball the last couple of years, but to beat your biggest rival by 35 at home, especially after some of the struggles you had in the non-conference slate, like, it was just such a coming out party for this team. Number 7, I've got Nick Clifford being reunited with Isaiah Stevens via the NBA draft. I think most of us saw Sacramento and were like, okay. Especially when they signed Russell Westbrook, like a couple months later. But the fact that we get Neek and Zay reunited in the same organization is really cool. There's some opportunities both in the G League and in the NBA for them to play together, which is a really unique storyline. Just cool to be able to say 2 of the most significant and talented players in school history are doing their thing together with the same organization, just like they were at Moby for all those years. Number 6, I've got this year, the Hoops win over CU at Moby Arena. Crazy. It's our Super Bowl, and it didn't even make the top 5. But obviously, winning over the Buffs, little more weight, right? It's always going to be a little bit more fun. Trolling them is a little bit more satisfying. But that was a significant win, the most significant win of the Farouk era to this point. Felt like it was a little bit of much needed payback after, really laying an egg the year before and not even showing up in Boulder. One of the more frustrating performances of the Medved era, actually. His last 2 trips to Boulder both were kind of atrocious, but that was a big win. That was a signature win. It was one Farouk Manesh needed to kind of validate that, yes, we do have the right guy. I think everybody understands he's a great recruiter, great developer of talent, great man, but you've got to be able to win the big games, right? And I know that they did not show up in Logan in this most recent outing, but that was a really encouraging performance. And I think it was the kind of win you need if you're going to get the community to fully back you and believe you are the man to continue to, elevate this program moving forward. Number 5, Neek, in his monster performance at Boise, dropping 36 in a must-win scenario for CSU. That is the single greatest performance by a Ram I think I've covered on the basketball side of things. It's that or Gian and Viejas in 2017, which is still just one of the more absurd performances. But like, given what was at stake, I think that elevated things just a little bit. Just an incredible performance. Number 4, we're going CSU hiring Ali Farouk-Manesh. I think everybody wanted him, or not everybody, but the majority of the fans, the masses, that was the guy we wanted. And the search drew out a little bit longer than people anticipated, and people are starting to be like, oh man, is he going to get the job? Is he not? I thought it was really cool to see the guy the community basically single-handedly backed get his moment and get the job that he deserved. Number 3, the March Madness win over Memphis. It's the final, big moment of what was just an incredible run. And I guess here at 3, I've got the NCAA tournament win over Memphis. 1, I have the Mountain West tournament run for CSU hoops. Seeing the Rams win a conference championship in person. I didn't get to go to the NCAA tournament in person. Seattle was a tough destination to pull off travel-wise. It's too expensive, unfortunately. To be there in person meant a lot to me. And I'm not trying to be a cornball here, but like I get emotional when I think about it. And I got the confetti in the background there, but it's not always easy being a CSU fan. Everybody knows that. We get mocked all the time. The little brother bullshit, all of that stuff, it gets old. We get it. When you're loyal, man, and you go through the lows that we've been through as a fan base, when you get to experience something like that, it makes it all worth it. And like that was the most gratifying experience that I've had professionally. And to get to cover Medved and seeing it all come together after years of building the program up, and Nick Clifford's journey, after everything he'd been through, and all those guys, it was so special. But that NCAA tournament win over Memphis, man, you couldn't tell me nothing after that. I was feeling myself, pounding my chest, man. It's why it sucks so bad that it ended in such an ambiguous fashion. Is, who knows what they could have done? Because at that point, that team was as hot as anybody. Sandwiched in between 1 and 3, though, I have CSU football hiring Jim Mora, because it was the most important hire this program has had probably ever, given what's at stake, given how much is in flux in college football right now. And after the season that this fan base went through, after how just beaten down and really broken and fractured things had become, you needed to find somebody that was going to reignite the passion, that was going to bring a little bit of joy and excitement back. And I firmly believe that when you look at realistic options, CSU made as good of a hire as they could have in this scenario. And I think to pull that off in this chaotic coaching carousel cycle after going 2-10, man, that's a testament to the search firm and the search group, and John Weber, and it's a testament to what CSU can be, man. So I think the future is very bright. And I'm really excited to see what 2026 can bring. We'll talk a little bit about that Nevada game tomorrow. Again, we're going to try and get Sanford on at some point, probably somebody else to talk hoops as well. Shout out to all you guys for rocking with us. Hope you had a very happy holiday season. Come by the DNVR bar this week if you're looking for somewhere to watch bowl games, college football playoff. I think we're opening at 11 a.m. It's going to be awesome. Thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your order. Much love, y'all. We are always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.